to record. Okay, so the recording is in progress and we are out on YouTube. So, so the recording is in progress and we are out on YouTube. So welcome everyone to the Silicon Valley chapter of IEEE Computer Society event. So the recording is in progress and we are out on YouTube. Where is that coming from?
I think it's from the YouTube.
Yeah, it is. I paused it. So yeah, I think we are good now. So welcome to the Silicon Valley chapter of IEEE Computer Society event. I am the chapter chair, Vishnu Pendyala. Ours is the largest chapter in the Silicon Valley section of IEEE with over 3,500 subscribers in our mailing list and a strong following of over 12,300 on Twitter alone. We are uniquely positioned by the virtue of our location and available expertise. And today we have panelists coming from Google, Microsoft, and Netflix with us. I teach machine learning and data science at San Jose State University. So today's topic is revolutionizing healthcare using generative AI. So I'll request the panelists to introduce themselves as well. So Chinmay, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. Hey folks, I'm Chinmay. I work for Microsoft in the newly announced Microsoft AI org on generative AI. And, really happy to be invited and join the experts here on this panel.
Thanks, Chinmay. Lakshmanan, you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, thank you, Vishnu, and IEEE SCV chapter for inviting me as one of this another panel on generative AI for healthcare. So yeah, this is Lakshman, currently working for Google and helping enterprise customers innovate with AI and ML solution, especially focusing on generative AI. Yeah, looking forward to have a great, fruitful discussion.
Ruchi?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ruchi. I work at Netflix. I've been with them for about 5.5 years now. And I work on their internal tooling infrastructure, which helps streamline their organizational and corporate processes. And generative AI is new to Netflix. And just like every other company, we try to use every opportunity to use it within our products to improve the processes. And very excited to be invited to this discussion on generative AI in healthcare. I hope to share my experience and my knowledge over here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So let's get started with the questions. Then the attendees can post their questions in the chat window, either on Zoom or on YouTube. So the first question I have for you guys is, how can generative AI help with personalized medicine and treatment plans for patients? Like we have all these digital twins, virtual patients, and all the exciting stuff going on. So if you can share some of your insights, that will be great. So who wants to go first?
So yeah, can I go first? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure, Vishnu. So when it comes to healthcare, like right now the data are siloed, and you have structured data which sits in a format in a system like Epic systems, where most of the healthcare users in Epic structure there, and there are some unstructured data like images, X-rays, prescriptions, clinical data for each for each and every patient's, like it's all so as generative AI solves most of this problem with having one single repository and drive insights. So I would definitely, there are already
lot of progress made by different organizations like uh, healthcare net and other organizations where they use the single pane of glass, bringing all the data across a different format and making personalized recommendations like when to sleep and when to like what making diagnostic easier, like from different data and predicting their possible medications and solutions. So I think that's a huge potential here. I mean, to untap it with the help of the rise of generative AI and LLM. But still, we are pretty in early stage. Things are going in research, and then there are very few organizations adapting it. From my experience, so I think this has a potential to explode in near future the healthcare with the capabilities of generative AI. So yeah, I'll leave it to the rest of the panel so I can continue.
Yeah, I can put in my 2 cents over here. I was watching this TED talk the other day, and it actually focused on a very important point, where in today's world, like Lakshman said, the data is so siloed, and we don't have a variety of data information in our systems to effectively generate recommendations. So basically, the way it's working in today's world is when we collect data points. So patients with similar data points, like similar clinical profiles or even similar genetic informations, can be used to diagnose a specific disease. So, for example, based on a pre-trained information, a new patient with a similar clinical profile, like I said, can be diagnosed with a specific disease, and with a high confidence, treatment options can be suggested for this particular person, and also with a specific success rate of that treatment option, how successful will this treatment will be for this person is available. Other than that, in treatments like cancer or even diagnosis of cancer, which is a fairly very complex process, so details like a person's blood sample or X-rays, MRIs, and various different information can be fed into these models. And with a very high confidence, the model can detect a primary or a secondary cancer even, or the primary site of the cancer within the anatomy of the human body for that specific patient. So these are the advancements that we are able to, see in today's world with generative AI, which is specifically used within healthcare to diagnose, different diseases, and even like predict how the person will be impacted with this specific disease and how treatments will be possible for this person.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of them. I think in my personal opinion and experience, right, like even pre-Gen AI, just deep learning based AI has proven itself really good, better than us humans at detecting patterns, anomalies in things like X-rays, MRIs, etc. But what Gen AI really brings to the table is the ability to interact with the patient, understand their natural language, uh, capture cues based on like what they're saying, what they're trying to tell the doctor, and that level of just extracting information from conversations that patients have with their doctors was not possible using pre-Gen AI artificial intelligence, right? So what you're doing really here is building a human user interface between our healthcare services and patients, upping the quality of their interaction so we're able to connect the right kind of medical solutions, healthcare solutions to patients who need them faster, quicker, right? The other thing, just supporting what Lakshman and Ruchi said, right? Like, you can fine tune these LLMs backing generative AI applications to a specific domain. So you can train them to get better at medicine or a particular domain of medicine, right? And you're able to process through a lot more historical patient cases, a lot more medical literature to potentially come up with better curated solutions for the patient at hand. So I think that is something that generative AI enables, which even with state-of-the-art machine learning before GenAI became a thing, it was hard to achieve. I
Yeah,
think that's what makes
exactly.
GenAI a game changer, really.
Yeah, exactly, Chinmay. Adding on top of this, fine tuning the LLM models for healthcare. So there is a MedLM from Google Cloud, which is like specifically fine tuned for healthcare. So which is like there is a possibility of using that model with different healthcare providers. And I know that we've been from what the external resources available. I mean, there are a lot of health uh, health companies and organizations who holds the customers and patients records. They're looking to use this model, right? So you're right. I mean, the personalized recommendation is possible with the interaction. I mean, gone are the days when you need to go to the doctor. And now what I foresee is like in future where everybody have a virtual assistant or chatbot. Like you can ask the questions to that chatbot and see what is the next step for your medical condition, right? Like for example, you see like you see you're having a pain or facing some fever, having some fever or cold, cough, and any medications. It's pretty easy. You talk to a LLM model, which is like equivalent to tested and passed by the doctors and healthcare physicians across the world. I mean, it reduces the time, right? There is no, I see that future coming up soon. Like you don't need to risk visit patients, hospital for trivial stuffs, right? For healthcare, for physical or some trivial stuff. I think that time is going away with the advancement of Gen AI. So yeah, that's my perspective on fine tuning the LLM for medical use cases and clinical records. Yeah.
I just wanted to add this one last thing. I remember Vishnu also mentioning about virtual patients, which is another technique how Gen AI is used in healthcare. So based on many medical records and different patient profiles, it can generate a synthetic profile, which is a fake person based on those clinical profiles or like real data. A fake profile is generated for the user, which is called as the virtual patient. And how this helps is that different treatment options based on this person's profile, which signifies a specific disease that the patient is experiencing, how different treatment options will be successful on this specific person or with the virtual patient. And based on this particular information and various research which is done on this virtual patient, treatment options can be then recommended to real world people who are experiencing similar or the same disease with that profile. So just wanted to put that in since Vishnu mentioned about virtual patient.
Yeah, so there's a question from the audience. So Bryce Jensen is asking, how does the panel see the FDA and doctors associations interacting with Gen AI? Is there a regulatory challenge here?
So, if I may, right, so regulation is definitely helpful in the sense that, the governments which we elect, they are trying to make sure that whatever steps we as a population or as companies take, like it broadly benefits the population of this country, the population of this world, right? Uh, so the way I see Gen AI practitioners, experts working with the regulators is trying to see, how can we, first of all, factor in some of the most relevant use cases, some of the most relevant needs of the population to improve how regulation is created in this case, right? FDA regulation, when you create a new drug, just getting approval can be a multi-month process, right? So one is like, how do we make sure the regulations that are made are aligning with what the people need in this day and age, and they're updated fast enough, because we have a lot of regulation that might not be up to spec, up to the need of the people, right? One thing that I remember distinctly is when COVID happened and we had vaccines in a year and a half. I remember listening to an interview from the founders of BioNTech who said, the day we had the genome of COVID-19, we had the drug, we had the mRNA solution available ready the next day. And it took a year and a half to test it, take it through clinical trials, take it through approvals. It took a year and a half to bring it to the people, right? So where I see GenAI really making a difference is trying to help reduce that gap. This is not about loosening regulation, or this is not about taking risky steps in the process of bringing treatments to the patients who need them. This is about trying to figure out like where the inefficiencies lie, what are the things that we can automate, we can make GenAI take care of, so that humans who are involved in the equation can basically take on the role of like, making sure everything is tied up cleanly, all the important steps are done, where GenAI is handling things like matching patients with the right clinical trials. It's making sure like all regulatory approvals, processes, drug discovery, things are done in an automated way, taking humans out of the equation so that they can focus on more important things. So I think I look at GenAI really as a partner with the regulators, with the FDA, to streamline their processes and improve them at the same time, while cutting down time from need of a drug, need of a treatment, to availability.
I think the motivation for the question is probably because GenAI is probabilistic, right? It's stochastic. So there's some uncertainty and some possibility of hallucinations and things like that. So
that's where technology partners come in, right? So this is a new tool, this is a new technology. Hallucinations are definitely one of the many issues that you have to deal with when you're using GenAI, but you also have to look at like what this can enable really, right? It does give you a powerful tool to do more. And whatever issues come up with it, like hallucinations, like, we have techniques to try to train the LLM to make sure, just like any other machine learning model, right? Like, to bring up its performance parameters, to bring up its accuracy parameters, to test it, to validate it before taking it to the production field, right? Even humans in the equation, not by intent, but just by virtue of us being humans, we make mistakes, right? So we have to make sure, as we are building these GenAI systems to assist us in critical tasks, especially like healthcare, or like, if you're designing space travel or something like that, right? So you have to make sure you are tackling, it's hard to say you eliminate any of the negatives of generative AI systems, but you're tackling some of the major issues and making sure that wherever you're using it, it's having a positive impact.
yeah, if you look at the history of artificial intelligence, applying AI to healthcare is not really new, right? Like expert systems. Those days, it was all experts. It was expert systems. There was an expert system, like I think it was called Mycin. It was highly successful. It achieved an accuracy of, I think, 97% or something like that. Medical diagnosis. I think it was it was diagnosing blood cancers or something like that. But in spite of such successes, expert systems for healthcare have failed the test of time. So I was curious if GenAI will not go that route. I mean, there's a lot of promise in GenAI, but I think I'm not very sure if we are there yet. So what, in your opinion, are some of the technical advancements that can ensure the accuracy and generalizability of these GenAI models for healthcare?
So Vishnu, I mean, to answer your question, you're asking, I mean, if I'm understood your question, like how is the accuracy is predicted in generative AI for healthcare systems? Like how accurate is it? Is that?
Yeah. So how close are we to actually productionalize the GenAI models for healthcare? Say, for instance, diagnosis. So expert systems failed for a different reason. They failed the test of time for not really accuracy, but the trust probably was missing there. Or I don't know what. what exactly happened, but in
Yeah.
GenAI, I clearly see the stochastic nature of GenAI as a shortcoming.
Yeah. So I would like to quote a case study here. Like, for example, Google MedLM model, which is like, fine-tuned model for healthcare. It passes this USMLE exam with a rating of 90% and 91 percentage, right? So, which is the hardest exam to crack in United States if you want to practice, get into the medical doctor field, right? So it proves that it has all the capabilities like a human doctor, where it can able to diagnose us, help the patients to recover quickly, or get the patients, get to the diagnosis, or get to this finding the new, for all the diagnosis related questions, right? So that was one of the research published recently. Like, the Medella model was continuously beating this, clearing this exam. So I would say, I mean, yeah, accuracy wise, of course, I mean, it's a long way to go. So in my opinion, we have pretty much early stages, but there are other use cases like, Apollo 24, Apollo, which is a major healthcare provider back in India, which has used uh, some single pane of glasses across the different data using generative AI, which is like possible to have all the, let's say you have a patients coming in and you want to have all the information in a single place, rather than you go back and refer it in the system, and your drugs are in X, and your medical images are in X-ray format, 3D scan format, and your data is in a different databases. So that problem is solved with the help of generative AI. And especially I mean, recent blog which I read about Apollo, it talks about how they create a single pane of glass for making a quick decision about the medicine, a patient's conditions. So those are the areas I have already seen some implementations, but in my opinion, but with respect to future predictive diagnostics areas or synthetic data, which I have not heard anything from that front. If maybe I may not wrong, but so these are the things which have achieved so far with the help of generative AI. So I would like to highlight that, Vishnu and team. Yeah.
Yeah, I think 2 points come to my mind when we think about this. The first one is, training the data based on diverse data sets. So it is very important so that the model is not biased. For example, if a certain, model is trained highly about, white male who are middle-aged, for example, the model can be highly biased when predicting diseases for other, people who belong to other kind of demography. And this is important so that we reduce the bias. Hence, it is very important that we try to collect as much, variable data from different demographics and different, kind of people, so that the model is not biased. And the other point that comes to my mind is that the AI model should be uh, predictable, or it should be able to explain after itself when it's suggests a certain treatment plan or has done certain kind of a diagnosis, because it's important to at first, gain the trust of the healthcare professionals and also patient to which the treatment option has been recommended for. But on top of that, AI should be able to explain after itself how it arrived at that certain decision for it, for example, a treatment option, which steps it to generate this kind of a decision making. It should be able to explain after itself. So these two things would be very important, as a process of, just being more trustable for an AI model, for example.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with, like, explainability is important, and training it on diverse data sets. So you have the model is trained on all inputs that are relevant to the results, right? But so my 2 cents on this would really be like, one thing to keep in mind is GenAI is a very new and nascent technology, right? It's powerful, but it's still fairly new. And it's basically advancing at a breakneck pace. So if I said, like, I can tell where this is going to be, what GenAI is going to look like 5 years, 10 years from now, like, I would be lying, right? I don't know that. But I think it's also unfair, at least in the near term, to look at GenAI as a do it all and trusted solution to some of the most critical problems, right? So one of the things I heard recently, I think our CDO went on stage somewhere and said this, like, that GenAI is not autopilot, it's a co-pilot. And the way to look at this is really an assistant, right, to the doctors. We are not trying to replace doctors and come up with like AI doctors here. The doctors are specialists in their domain. They have operated on a lot more real life use cases. They have dealt with diversions, like they start operating on some other issue happens, and they have to deal with those real life situations, right? What Gen AI is really giving them, it's assisting them with more information, more relevant information. Let's say there's a particular unique case that a doctor sees, right? What if the doctor could, without having to spend their time going through the literature, find 100 other similar use cases that have happened in recent times across hospitals in the United States or across the world, right? Of course, with privacy and everything of patient records taken into account. But let's say they were able to see, like, hey, when was this particular condition, this symptom that the patient is talking to me about last seen in the last 100 cases, right? And they're able to see the diagnosis, and they're able to see what kind of treatments worked and what kind of treatments failed, right? If you can have this information at the palm of your hand, this expert doctor can probably see 10x more patients, treat 10x more cases than they would otherwise be able to, right? And that's value added right then and there. So I think that's where GenAI, at least in the near term, adds value to health tech field, where you could do more things more efficiently while humans can actually focus on the creative, on the more critical decisioning tasks, right? It's not about removing humans from the equation. It's about automating, letting Gen AI, or it's like stochastic approach, do more things. And yes, 1 out of the 9 things that Gen AI returns to you, 1 out of the 10 things might be wrong, might be inaccurate, but that's where the human in the loop is going to be able to look at it and say, this looks funky. This is probably not accurate. Let me try, asking again, or let me try validating it myself. I think that's the right way to look at it. It's not about like relying 100% on the slightly probabilistic nature of responses that GenAI comes up with. It's uh, letting GenAI do like some of the heavy crud work while we have humans validate and use it and deliver overall positive value.
Yeah, I think the co-pilot analogy really helps. It should be seen as a co-pilot rather than an autopilot.
I'm stealing that line
Yeah, I know, but
anytime someone asks me, because it's very appropriate. It
yes.
puts things into perspective.
Just wanted to plus one what Chinmay said. I was reading this article the other day, and Chinmay, to your point where you mentioned about transcribing and helping the healthcare professionals not spend a lot of time in like just documentation and these like mundane tasks. I was reading the data, and it said like 62% of a healthcare professional's time goes into documentation. So imagine the scale at which they could use up that free time and actually spend it doing what is meaningful to their line of profession, and how useful it would be for patients who are waiting in the line for like so
Yeah.
many hours or like even days for their treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah, scalability is a big plus with GenAI. These are really good insights. So Lakshmanan brought up medical imaging, right? So what are some of the challenges, technical challenges in dealing with complex medical imagery, and how can generative AI be utilized to improve medical imaging and diagnostic accuracy?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vishnu. So when I talk about medical image processing, let's assume that we have an X-ray scans, all those things, which is not, we don't have the record, right? We don't have data in our system where it's all like it's a document. I would say, let's treat it as an image document, like image or something. So for example, let's say a doctor to check those check x-ray and say like, hey, it's a problem in somewhere in lungs or something else. let's say if you feed this into the system, how quickly that predicts this, right? So it's more about predicting the possibilities of having some issue, some conditions within the lungs, or what are the organs. I mean, it depends. Again, the X-ray. So I would say, like, in that case, Gen AI can do much quicker. Of course, I mean, much quicker way of identifying. You know, Again, based on the training data which Ruchi and everybody mentioned, like how often you feed your training data, how quality is your, the training data for the X-ray images here in this example. Again, it's able to predict the medical condition. So that could be the major breakthrough if that happens. But uh, I would say, like, yeah, that is something pretty early stage in my experience, in my opinion. But yeah, that could be the potential possible breakthrough happening with Gen AI for healthcare, identifying the anomalies, or predicting the your conditions, based on your X-ray imaging, right? Instead of you go to doctor and see that. I mean, let's say if the system can do that, that could be a quick, and it can be efficient, right? So in that way, it avoids as Chinmay mentioned, it can free the doctor's time, or clinician time from this mundane task, like for example this one. And then again, of course, it may need a validation, because you know how generative system works. It may hallucinate. There is a chance. Again, it all depends on the accuracy perspective, but still we can go ahead with the first pass with a generative AI system for this these kind of use cases.
Yeah, another really interesting thing I would say is, like, so we all know ChatGPT, we played around with it. Bing Copilot, we played around with it. So it's very like text chat based right now. But newer and newer LLMs are also coming up as being multimodal in nature. And what that means is, instead of feeding it with text, you can actually feed it images, right? And it will basically be able to interpret what that image is about and do something based on it, right? So if you train this newer multimodal LLM on medical data, medical images, it will learn to recognize some of these images and draw inferences from it, right? It will learn to potentially detect patterns in it. Another interesting thing with the whole Gen AI thing is something called agentic LLMs, which is a new concept, or like a new term that's becoming popular, where you have your front-facing LLM that takes in some input, but when it figures out it's not an expert at something, it talks to another agent at the back, which could be an LLM itself, or let's say a very finely tuned deep learning algorithm for detecting cancerous patterns in medical images, right? Or detecting bone structure anomalies in your X-rays or things like that. So you could have very specialized agents at the back, with an LLM being like the human interface at the front, where you could give it an image and it could delegate the responsibility of figuring out, like, who at the back end is an expert at this. So think of like you going to your doctor saying you have chest pain, and they recommend X-rays, and then you go to a specialist, right? You'd have to take the appointment of the specialist. The specialist might send you to somebody else. Uh, Now imagine, like, having generative AI kind of do it for you in a much shorter duration. Again, there's humans in the loop, there's specialists in the loop to validate whatever Gen AI is saying. But it also, like, scalability is something we talked about a moment ago, but it's also extensibility of generative AI, where you could have like a general doctor LLM where you're able to give it medical images, and based on where what kind of an image it is, it's an X-ray, it's a potential biopsy scan, it could be passed on to another agent LLM, which specializes in analyzing, let's say, a biopsy scan and telling you whether something is potentially malignant or benign. So in those senses as well, like, you're getting a lot of value with Gen AI, which ideally you could, before Gen AI, you could potentially build tools which doctors would have to manually use with those specific type of images. Now you can have multimodal LLMs where you give it a medical image, and in a short duration, get some sort of opinion, recommendation, diagnosis back. This is something that was had to be like, you had to manually connect these bits and pieces pre-Gen AI era, even if you had state-of-the-art machine learning to do some of these things.
Yeah, that is very insightful, Chinmay. I was reading about one such model, which is the latent diffusion model that has recently emerged as a very powerful image reconstruction and image reconstructing and enhancement model. So not only like it converts poor image resolution qualities into high res, but also like reconstructs missing part of an image, for example, like an X-ray or an MRI scan. Uh, One other thing that was very striking to me was the prediction and simulation part of this specific model, wherein given the historical images of a specific patient, it can detect how this disease would progress within this patient and create future images based on that information. So it can predict and simulate what it would look like, down the line, a month or a year even, for this specific patient, and help with like early detection and early treatment options for this person.
Yeah,
That's very interesting.
yeah. I think it can also help with augmenting the data, right? Like the imagery. Um, so it can probably fill in some missing detail in the images and probably
Yeah.
can create some synthetic data, synthetic images as well. So there is some interesting discussion going on YouTube as well, on live. So Hesham, who is one of our longtime IEEE members, is asking, is there a successful real life uh, example using LLM for healthcare? Does anyone know?
I know there's certainly a lot of demand. I mean, if anyone followed GTC and NVIDIA's announcements there, right? Like, they came up with uh, LLM microservices for inferencing for usage, and they had specific emphasis on healthcare med tech focused LLM microservices to do research. Novo Nordisk, the companies that gave us Ozempic andYgeny or something, the slimming down drugs, they are basically taking all the money they're making from these drugs and building one of the largest AI supercomputers to do faster drug discovery, faster clinical trials in Europe. So there's definitely interest for that. And I'm certain like they've seen some success stories. They've seen the potential for use of AI and generative AI in general to further medtech, health tech.
Yeah, I think one of the barriers probably for really productionalizing the models is ethical considerations that Ruchi mentioned, right? Like fairness, explainability. Chinmay also talked about it. So do you see any other ethical considerations that need to be taken into account when implementing generative AI in healthcare decision making?
Yeah, one thing apart from all the different points we talked about, like data privacy or even bias, one thing that comes to mind is over dependency on AI for treatment diagnosis or even treatment plans. So what this can actually lead to is de-skilling of the highly trained healthcare professionals when they are over dependent on AI models for diagnosis or even treatment option planning, and not relying on their own real judgment of a specific treatment plan or how this disease would progress over time. So I think dependency on, or like over dependency on AI could be a major concern going down the line, but I think like they can still be mitigated with proper regulatory actions on how much of the AI you can use in diagnosis, or on what kind of patient, which stage this patient is going through for that specific disease, where in that you can use that and how much you can use that. It can definitely help with the over dependency, in my opinion.
Okay.
So another one I can think of, in addition to Ruchi, like for example, the healthcare has to go through a lot of compliance, right? For example, a bank has to go to FedRAMP. Similarly, healthcare organization has to go for a HIPAA compliance. So those are the things that we need to make sure whoever building the GenAI solutions for healthcare, it has to be HIPAA compliant. Let's make sure that it follows certain regulations and rules set by the government. So for different countries, right? So HIPAA is for, you look at our countries standards and procedure, what are the compliance, so make sure we compliant with the way that we process the data, which is like, especially with the privacy, how much information we can mask it or anonymize it instead of keeping it public, right? So those are the things that I can think of when we talk about ethical consideration, like compliance factor, right? Based on the country that or the patient's data, that based on the country's patient's data.
Yeah, I think for me, when you talk about ethics, right, like something as powerful as Gen AI, right? And when I say powerful, it's because like any and every industry wants to use it to improve their processes, to improve their products, to deliver value, right? And when you have a tool so powerful, its benefits should be equitably distributed across the population, right? Historically, or like most of the times when any new technology is invented, it is generally very expensive and it access kind of trickles down along uh, economic lines, I would say socioeconomic lines, with some of the most privileged getting the benefit a lot sooner than some of the more underprivileged parts of the population. With generative AI kind of building this, bridging this gap between people of technology and without like technical knowledge to all kinds of services, right? Especially for healthcare. I think one of the things that we need to make sure as AI practitioners, experts, leaders, teachers in this field is to make sure that the benefits of generative AI, especially when it comes to medicine, health tech, are equitably distributed to all parts of the population of the world, right? It should not create inequality in terms of access to whatever we learn, whatever value we are able to deliver with medtech, with health
Yeah, I agree with all of your insights. So I think one of the shortcomings of Gen AI is probably the explainability, right? See, like I keep going back to the same example of expert system called Mycin, because my undergrad project was in expert systems, and Mycin was a big favorite at that time. Uh, of course, Mycin dates back much before my undergrad project, but it was an inspiration. So So in terms of, so Mycin was totally rule based, so explainability was not a problem. You could always trace back the rules and then know how it reached at the conclusion or the diagnosis. But with generative AI, I think explainability is a challenge. So how do you think the XAI or explainable AI techniques can be integrated into this AI-driven medical decision making, particularly for both healthcare professionals and patients?
Yeah, so I think first of all, I mean, given how new this field is, like, we are going to stumble a little bit while we figure out some of these things. I know explainability, as you said, is like one of the biggest challenges that's being worked on. And we have seen like, Chat GPT falter a fair bit. We saw like, Google's Gemini make mistakes. So we are going to have to like try this new technology, this newfound tool on slightly less critical use cases to understand how it works, how we can improve it, right? One of the things that we figured out is like, when generative AI is generating answers for us, right? Is it telling you something that's factual or something that is inaccurate, right? So we learn to give citations, right? Of like, hey, this is, the answer to your question, and these are three websites where I found this. So the reader can go and actually read through the sources and validate what's going on. I think that's like a positive step. There's a lot more work to be done in this area of like, building trust with LLMs and like understanding why it gave a certain answer. But I think like the way to approach this really is to start with experimenting with non-critical use cases, understanding how this technology is working, and tackling some of these questions, bringing more explainability, and then going on to tackle more and more critical use cases before we come to depend on it a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great points, Chinmay. So in my experience, explainability in healthcare is pretty challenging, as Vinshu mentioned, because we cannot share how a system make a decision, ML system, in this case, because of the sensitive data involved, because you have a patient's data, you have clinical records, which is not supposed to be shared. So yeah, I see a great challenge in implementing this explainability for healthcare use cases. Maybe, yeah, that's the right approach. Start with simple use cases where you don't need to share much of the critical information, where explainable AI can be implemented. Like how a Gen AI system come to a conclusion that for a given problem. So yeah, pretty challenging especially when you're dealing with healthcare data and sensitive information.
Yeah, I just wanted to like lay out an example that we use within Netflix itself. We've recently worked on productizing information discovery within the company. So basically, uh, think about Google search, but at the scale of Netflix itself. So just searching for various different kind of documents within the company. And the way we are using explainability in context of Netflix's internal search is when the model gives you a specific answer to a question that the user is searching for, it sends back, or like it lists out the documents that it read in order to come to this in order to give this answer to the user. So explainability in a smaller context plays a biggest role, or a big role over here, in the sense that when the AI model tells you what documents it had gone through to generate this answer, it increases our trust on the answer that was generated by this AI model, because we know like these were the documents that were read by the model, or like through which the model learned and came to this specific conclusion. So not quoting this, but just giving out my 2 cents on similar steps can probably be taken by healthcare Gen AI models, even to just lay out how it came to this particular decision by being more transparent about the documents that led to that decision.
Yeah. Thanks for those insights. So one burning question I think many people have on their minds is about infectious disease, right? Like we have gone through a pandemic and it created a lot of devastation. Uh, so what role do you think generative AI can play in predicting and preventing spread of infectious diseases?
So I think this is something I don't know if Gen AI was not used for this because I think it's definitely pre-chat GPT. But after the COVID pandemic had happened and like a couple of years into it, I remember someone showing an analysis of people searching for cold and flu medication correlating, like at a particular time, kind of correlating with infections growing in certain areas, right? And this is an analysis that someone did in retrospect to kind of show like, hey, we could use something like this to predict where epicenters of like some sort of a pandemic, a hotspot is showing up, and then move on to take actions based on that, right? Uh, Generative AI LLMs can process a lot of information thrown at it and catch some of these patterns, right? If we basically ask it, if we basically train it to say, like, hey, these are the kind of themes that you want to alert. It's almost like monitoring on data that we as humans produce in different forms. Again, I understand that brings up like a lot of data access, data control, privacy concerns, but as with everything, like we have to find like a solution that does less harm, protects people's privacy while delivering some sort of utility. So LLMs can actually process a lot more textual information, photographic information that we humans produce, analyze that, and catch some of these anomalies, right? Like, hey, everyone is looking for cold medication. Like, this might be a very trivial case that I'm saying. Maybe something's going on in this part of town, right? Like, maybe we should flag it. Maybe we should bring it up, kind of, right? So that's where I think LLMs can really excel, really deliver scale in terms of like catching these things before they happen. The difficult problem, a lot of times, again, is going to be giving it access to the right kind of data sets, uh, training these LLMs in the right way, and making sure that they are energy efficient, I think, which is one of the biggest issues with running LLMs on a lot of information at this point in time. But again, that's a problem I'm pretty sure a lot of smart minds are working on solving right now, even as we speak.
Yeah, one more thing that comes to my mind, Chinmay, is the simulation of how the disease would spread even. So
Mm.
based on data, for example, the travel patterns of a specific region, how many people are traveling or where they are traveling to, even like their social distancing patterns, cultural patterns. For example, summer is a big thing in Americas. People can barely stay at home, whereas in countries like India, it's like super duper hot. People try to stay back. So things like these kind of considerations can, or like even data based on these consideration can help predict like how the disease would spread if we don't take early measures, and even recommend what measurement or measures should be taken to avoid such scenarios. So simulation is a big thing that comes to my mind when thinking about just spreadable diseases like these.
Yeah. So in addition to that, I would love to add few more points from the predicting the variants, like how how the like if you're feeding those molecules to the GenAI system, like similar to image processing or X-ray processing, so you can predict again whether it's a COVID variant or not from the past samples that we have used to train. And another thing, it's not only for predicting or COVID. Maybe we can use it as a in community enablement tool, like later stages. Let's say you have to create a flyer or information based on creating a content. So I'm just focusing on one of the features of generative creating the content, text content, for example. Depends on the country or depends on the culture you live, you customize your content based on, like for example, you would have seen a lot of announcement during COVID, like wash your hands, wear the mask and all those things. Maybe come creative with creating different images, different sort of content creation with the help of Gen AI. So that can, which is not possible, I mean, without Gen AI, because you have to do it manually. Like everybody has to go into a system, create their own posters and based on their culture. But with the help of Gen AI system, so you can feed a machine, like ask the machine to, let's say, like, can you create a flyer for this country to make sure they are, you know avoiding COVID symptoms, or make sure they are safe from COVID. So it can give us some idea around, like, some creative way based on the culture and based on the geography that the people living in. So that is the other side of the spectrum that I would like to focus on, for generative AI, for the for COVID kind of diseases or infection diseases. Yeah.
Yeah, so like faster global dissemination of valuable information with local language, local cues. So like, yeah, no, that's absolutely great.
Yeah, actually, some of that was already happening. Like a company called Blue Dot. In fact, I give this example to my students to motivate them to learn machine learning, right? I think a company called Blue Dot used machine learning to monitor outbreaks of infectious diseases, and they could predict that something was going on in Wuhan 9 days before the World Health Organization could actually declare a pandemic.
That's
So,
interesting.
yeah, so some of it was already happening, but GenAI could probably bring a lot more value to these things. So I think we are kind of nearing the top of the hour. So any closing thoughts, future directions, or potential future applications that you can think of or you want to share?
Yeah, there is just so much that Gen AI can even do in like today's world. I was just thinking about ways in which it can improve the processes. Like Chinmay mentioned about transcription and saving time on documentation. But once a similar scenario and other side of this is helping with scheduling even or resource allocation. There's a lot of time where simple medical devices are used by certain patients and they are not properly allocated across. So even with like scheduling and resource allocation, these can be improved upon, processes like these, so we can which can lead to maximum resource utilization and help more and more patients being able to use devices across. Other could be like predicting maintainability of these devices. For example, in like 3 months, you need to provide a proper maintenance for this device so that it can help with not breaking down the device suddenly when a patient is using it. So just avoiding these scenarios and making sure maximum utilization of devices can happen. These are also parts of the processes that we overlook sometimes, but can help immensely and tremendously with saving time.
Yeah. Yeah, my what I would say is like, to anyone who asks me about like, how should we approach Gen AI, how should we utilize it? I would say like, be curious, especially in health tech. Like, see what use cases you can use it for assistive initially, get used to it, understand where it works, understand where it doesn't work so well, and try to adopt it into your workflow to just give you scale, just give you like access to more information, just give you like accessibility with more patients. Like you might not speak their language, they might be saying something that Gen AI translates it to you with cultural cues that allows you to help them, apart from like all the other use cases like drug discovery, clinical trial regulations, that it can help with. But I would say be curious, adopt it. Don't say that like oh, I don't trust it, like it's not good enough yet. Adopt it, help it get better, right? Like, because that's with adoption is how we are going to improve it, and by improving it we are going to help ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great closing. I think we lost Lakshmanan. I think Google must have pulled him away. So there's a request on YouTube Live. Can you please provide a list of papers, articles mentioned by the panelists? So if you can email me the references, then I can post them
Absolutely.
on our website.
Yeah.
So thank you all. It was a really nice discussion. So hopefully we'll have more of these kind of discussions in the future.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Vishnu.
all right. Thanks, Richie. Thanks, Chinmay.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining. Bye now.